As more candidates released their health care proposals, Senator Bernie Sanders took a trip to Canada to emphasize one part of his Medicare for All plan. Sunday, he had 13 people with diabetes took a short journey from Detroit to Windsor, Canada, to get insulin at a Canadian pharmacy. Some of the families became emotional at the dramatic price differences between insulin available in the United States versus our northern neighbor. Senator Sanders credited that cost difference to greed.
Medicine, in this case insulin, is sold here in Canada for 1/10 of the price that it is sold in the United States. And it has everything to do with two factors. Number one, the incredible greed of the pharmaceutical industry. The three major manufacturers of insulin, and they control 90% of the market. And just coincidentally, it seems that they raise their prices at about the same rate at the same time.
Reforming drug pricing, of course, is just one facet of Sanders' Medicare for All plan, which has become the standard for many other 2020 contenders' health care plans. Likely will also be a topic of discussion tonight at the second Democratic debate. I think that's safe to say. Here to talk about the senator's initiatives, his run for the Oval, and so much more is Sanders' National Press Secretary, Brianna Joy Gray. Welcome back.
It's great to be here.
All right, so debate night 2, New York Times, Politico, everybody else is like, it's Warren versus Sanders. Is that what's going to happen?
That's the sexy narrative. Look, obviously they're both going to be on the stage, but of all people, they're the ones that probably share the most overlap in ideas. And I think that the real contrasts that are going to come out tonight in light of the healthcare plans that have come out over the past little while, including Senator Harris's plan, is going to be between those candidates. We're going to be seeing a lot of people who have previously said that they were for Medicare for all suddenly have to define what it is that they actually mean without being able to just kind of plaster that label on plans that frankly do not respect healthcare as a human right.
Yeah, and I think that is the fundamental difference. I think the senator said, what are we going to see between you and Elizabeth Warren? He said intelligence, which I like that. I thought that was interesting. I do wonder about this Medicare for All branding. I've asked Sanders people this before, which is, how is it to see your like flagship healthcare proposal basically be adopted by the entire Democratic Party? And is it difficult to say, hey, I came up with this first, all of you are kind of just like grifting on or in some certain way by saying, oh, public option or this? I mean, Joe Biden is really the only one to explicitly denounce it in terms of the major candidates.
Which that honesty is appreciated, frankly. I mean, before the last set of debates, the conversation was all about how are you going to distinguish yourself, Bernie Sanders? Everyone has now aped all of your policy platform from 2016. So what's the point of you now? And I think what's become clear is that these people's imitations are meager at best, and that what's coming out as people are forced increasingly to actually talk about what they believe is that they know that Bernie Sanders' ideology is good marketing, that he's done a really great job of explaining to the people that, yes, they deserve health care as a human right, and Medicare for All is that, so much so that they feel that they need to adopt that label. But at bottom, they haven't actually adopted what it means at its core. And part of that, I think, is because, unlike Bernie Sanders, a lot of these candidates haven't taken the pledge not to take money from the pharmaceutical industry. And you're seeing exactly what that influence manifests.
Yeah. Well, that's also just like such a weird way of looking at things. Like, okay, you led on this issue, everybody followed behind and grabbed onto the idea, so we're going to go with the copies. I mean, that just, you know, the logic doesn't make a lot of sense to me personally.
Well, it does if you're hoping that people aren't paying a lot of attention. And I think there is not a great deal of respect in certain parts of the political class and certain parts of the media class about what the American voter knows and understands. I think the work of politics is the work of communicating ideas to the people. And that aspect of it has largely gone forgotten by politicians who do a lot of poll testing and following. Real political leadership says, this is what's best for people. I've spoken to communities, I've spoken to medical experts, I've spoken to financial experts, and this is what can fix the country. And I'm going to sell that idea to the American people, and that's what Bernie Sanders has been doing over the last 3 years. And people who are selling him short and think that Americans are going to be easily confused about what's going on here, I think they're making a big mistake.
So the political establishment has written the obituary for Bernie many times. Now they say that he has a ceiling of support around 20%. That's a very convenient narrative, even though he's got the second choice of Joe Biden. Is that something that I just talk to me the way that the campaign is going through their thinking on this, which is, I mean, is it looking like a binary choice binary choice election for you in the primary?
This is a wild claim. A ceiling. Bernie Sanders has the highest favorability of any candidate. He won 44% of the vote in 2016. This is a man who has been able to inspire turnout in a way that other candidates haven't, because he's actually talking about working class issues and issues that are relevant to low-income people. When you look at who our supporters are, the #1 employer of people who have donated to the Bernie Sanders campaign is Walmart. It's people who work at McDonald's. And it's no surprise, because Bernie Sanders has been on the battleground of advocating for these workers to get a $15 minimum wage. Before he's even president of the United States of America, he's gotten a $15 minimum wage raise for over 100,000 American workers. And these are people who typically might think, I'm not going to come out and vote. I don't have time. I have to arrange childcare responsibilities. I have a lot on my plate. Yeah. What is going to change for me and make it worthwhile for me to come out of my house and vote in an election? Bernie Sanders is the first candidate in a long time that offers substantive and material changes for Americans that are genuinely struggling.
For people that work so hard for their money, as people do at Walmart, to give some of that money to a presidential campaign, I think is an incredible thing. Another thing that I actually was digging into the numbers on yesterday that doesn't get talked about a lot is Senator Sanders has really strong support in the Latino community.
Absolutely.
Like in California Quinnipiac poll, he led every candidate in terms of support among Latinos. What's going on there? What's the affinity?
Yeah, I think that you're right to point that out. As last I checked, he was #1 with Latino voters and #2 with Black voters, despite the fact that the narrative persists that somehow he has a problem there, and other candidates who are struggling don't get that narrative. But I think what's going on there is that these issues, those working class, low income issues that are often characterized as somehow like the white working class, these Midwestern white voters, those are actually issues that have an extraordinary amount of overlap with Black and Latino voters. Who disproportionately comprises those groups? It's Blacks and Latinos. And the idea that Blacks, Latinos, who are disproportionately underinsured, who disproportionately carry student loan debt, wouldn't be overwhelmingly attracted to these policies, that only could be possible in a world where you have an incredibly flat and frankly inaccurate and kind of insulting view of what matters to this incredibly diverse group of voters.
Another thing I want to get to is the president's attacks on Sanders on Baltimore. So I know the president was saying that Sanders has also denigrated the city of Baltimore, saying that it has its own problems. I know he's responded to that. Obviously, I'd love to get your response.
Yeah, the difference between Trump and Bernie Sanders here is the difference between a personal attack and a systemic critique. What Bernie Sanders was doing was going to Baltimore in the wake of the tragic death of Freddie Gray to talk about the systemic factors that contributed to that tragedy, and to say, I want to help enrich and uplift this underserved community and make sure that things like this don't happen again. Not because it's the fault of the people who are living here, but because these people have been betrayed by a whole host of factors, including the redlining, the deindustrialization that created the kinds of poverty and effects that have percolated through that community. Donald Trump, meanwhile, likes to cherry pick districts. It seems that the only thing that they really have in common is the hue of the people who work there and the people who legislate there, and call them out as though the failings of those districts are somehow related to who these people are, perhaps because of their race, right, or their personal background. And it's an attack that shows no leadership, no interest in actually supporting these people who are Americans and who he has a responsibility for as the President of the United States. And frankly, it's galling and shows that he has no credibility to be in that job.
Another happier question I have for you. So Senator Sanders and Cardi B teaming up together on a video at a nail salon?
Yeah.
Tell us more.
Look, they met in Detroit over the past few days. This has been in the works for a while. And Cardi B has been a long-time Bernie Sanders supporter. For those of you who were tracking it in 2016, you might have noted her support back then. I think she infamously tweeted, vote for Daddy Birdie. I'll leave the end of that quote off. But look, Cardi B is a smart cookie. I remember reading years ago, there was a great profile of her by Katie Weaver in GQ magazine, where it wasn't supposed to be a political profile, but she randomly starts talking about her favorite presidents, is able to list all of the presidents in order and then give you factoids about each of them, and is a huge FDR fan because it's a woman who grew up in the Bronx. She understands better than most what it means to be a member of a low-income community that's been underserved by her leadership. leadership and the real value of the social safety net and how it has enabled people like herself and like her family members to get a foothold in an incredibly competitive world.
So when does the video come out? What can we expect?
I think it comes out over the course of the next 2 days, and I think that you can expect all of the excitement and vim and bicker that you always get when Cardi B is on the stage.
It's going to get a lot of traffic, I can tell you that. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck tonight.
Thank you.
Next on Rising, as we've mentioned, a lot of eyes will be on Senator Elizabeth Warren's appearance during the debate. New
Hampshire journalist Paul Steinhauser had the chance to speak with her before the big night when she stopped in that battleground state of New Hampshire. He gives us the details. That is next.